Hello, it's Lance, and here on the Fab 4 Archivist channel, we look at what made the Beatles the biggest band in the world. And even though they broke up almost 50 years ago, there's still news to talk about. And that's what these Beatles news episodes are all about. But before we jump into the big news, a heads up. The official Beatles store is doing a 12 Days of Christmas giveaway that's already started. They're doing it sweepstakes style. It just takes a second to sign up and it's free to play. So hit the link in the description if you want to check that out. All right, moving on. Last week, Paul McCartney released two brand new songs, Home Tonight and In a Hurry. These are apparently leftovers from the Egypt Station sessions, which produced about 24 tracks total. Here's my hot take on the two new songs. These tracks are as good as anything else on the Egypt Station album. Home Tonight kicks off with a vintage acoustic bass and drum groove. The lyrics are simple but catchy, and when the horns and harmonies kick in, it's a guaranteed earworm. My favorite bit is when the drums go halftime. In a Hurry is a good tune too, with some surprising chord changes. The arrangement is pretty complex as well. It's got this 80s synth thing going on, with harpsichord and timpani, layered vocals, and horns with heavy saxes and some tubular bells. If you like pet sounds, this kind of production reminds me of that. Not too late, not too late. It's never too late to celebrate. But I've got to say, I'm not really a fan of the lyrics. Ultimately, it really just doesn't make a statement. So it's not Paul's best. The repeating never too late to celebrate refrain kind of reminds me of, but come on, my rule of thumb is that even a weak McCartney track is better than many artists' best work. But decide for yourself. The songs are now live on all streaming services, on YouTube, and also available as a picture disc single for the Black Friday edition of Record Store Day. Also in McCartney news, while Paul's not on tour at the moment, this past week he snuck in a one-song performance. I saw her standing there at a party related to wife Nancy's family business interests. Fans captured video of him with the house band. The scene appears pretty relaxed, and Paul sounds great, even though this is more like a live band karaoke gig than a true concert. The 2019 Beatles single set that was announced in October was released on November 22nd. It features 46 songs on vinyl, including, for the first time on vinyl, Free as a Bird and Real Love. If you're an audiophile, you'll be interested in exactly how these discs were cut, analog tape sourcing and all that. There's a broad discussion and a good review by Michael Fremer over at Analog Planet. There's a link to this in the description below. There are also a handful of unboxing videos out there, including one from my buddy Mitch Axelrod. The list price on the set was around $230, but it can be had for a little less. Again, check out the link below for the price on Amazon. Speaking of Mitch Axelrod, he co-hosts one of my favorite Beatles podcasts, Fab 4 Free For All. And those guys have a Patreon account set up so that listeners can show their support of the podcast. Most Beatles content creators, from podcasters to YouTubers, don't have sponsors or members to pay for production costs. So Patreon is a great way for listeners and viewers to show that they're thankful for the hard work that goes into creating this stuff. I've also got a Patreon set up for the Fab 4 Archivist channel, as does my previous collaborator, You Can't Unhear This. If you enjoy seeing things like my videos, consider supporting any of us or all of us on Patreon. It's easy, and $1 a month can go a long way. All right, back to a few more news stories. How do you define what it is about a song that makes it enjoyable? German researchers tried to answer that question by analyzing 745 popular songs, and they used machine learning to hone in on chord predictability. The theory being that this predictability is associated with why we like a song. As it relates to the Beatles, out of all the songs researchers tested on subjects, the one that was the most pleasurable was a shock to this Beatles fan. It was Obla-Dee, Obla-Da. I've linked to the full study in the description, but be forewarned, a lot of it is scientific jargon. The lab is a long way from happy ever after in the marketplace. The sister of Stu Sutcliffe has died. Pauline Sutcliffe passed away on October 13th of this year, although the news of her passing was delayed. Stewart, of course, was a pre-fame Beatle, and Pauline was very involved with his legacy, particularly his artwork. She wrote books on Stu's life and held some interesting opinions, particularly on his relationship with John Lennon. I'll spare you the details, but if you dig into this stuff, take her claims with a grain of salt. The last story for this episode actually isn't really about the Beatles. It's about their contemporaries, The Who. An article was published this past Monday in Rolling Stone that focuses on Pete Townsend and Roger Daltrey and their current relationship. The piece is a good read overall. It reminds me of good old rock journalism, with the writer injecting just the right amount of his own personality into the story. The Who's music made an impression on me as a teenager, and I loved when that band played as a band with John Entwistle and Keith Moon. But this article exposes division, not only between the two remaining members, but also quotes Townsend at his most harsh when discussing the dead bassist and the drummer. He said, "It's not going to make Who fans very happy, but thank God they're gone." I'm not quoting the article out of too much context here, but what context would make saying this okay? Hey, excuse the interruption and the kids playing piano downstairs if you can hear that. So I shot this video on Wednesday and I'm editing it later the same day. And now I've learned that Pete Townsend has tried to clarify his comments that I'm talking about here. The point that I'm trying to make, or that I do make here in the video, it still stands. So I'm not going to edit that bit out, but I will link to what Townsend had to say down in the description if you want to check that whole thing out. But his words are much kinder to the memories of John Entwistle and Keith Moon. All right, back to the video. Let's continue. I know this channel is all about the Beatles, not the Who or classic rock in general, but I bring this up to illustrate the lack of division between the Beatles' final living members and the estates of John Lennon and George Harrison. Of course, there have been squabbles over the years, some of which have played out really publicly. But in their wisdom, or maybe just excellent PR guidance, Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr in recent years have presented a unified front in celebrating the Beatles and their music. And they've certainly done it without any tacky implication that they're glad to be rid of John Lennon and George Harrison. Thank God for that. All right, that's it for this one. Let me know down in the comments what you think about what Pete Townsend had to say, or if you want to talk about any other news from this episode, I'll respond to as many comments as I can. And a final reminder, don't forget to enter that contest from the Beatles online store. All right, thank you so much for watching. See y'all next time.